Hello everybody. Today we are going to talk about setting up your price book if you were a time and materials billing company, or if part of your company does time and materials billing. This way we set up the price book in SuccessWare21 for time and materials billing, and then the device out in the field can utilize that. Now to do that, we're going to open the price book in SuccessWare by opening purchasing and going to the price book. This is going to load our price book. We click OK past this, and it brings us into our price book screen to go through and begin to talk about time and materials. Now with time and materials, it's typically two different sections you're working with. Parts right here, as well as labor. Now for labor, you want to make sure that you open up your labor items. Now wherever you're going to put your labor, you want to make sure that it's there. And with your labor, you're going to think about it in blocks of an hour. You want to set it up in blocks of an hour because when the technicians out in the field add items, they can actually add a decimal. So for example, if they're only doing a half an hour worth of work and you want them to bill that, they can do a half hour. So they do 0.5 of a labor item, or they can do a quarter of an hour if they're only doing 15 minutes. However much you allow them to break up the labor, they can go through and do it. And with labor, there's a couple different things. First off, you're going to open up the labor item, and there is some things you can do. First off, you have the item number right here. So you got to make sure that that's in there, and that's how the item would be sorted. Also, you can search for a labor item via the item number or the description. And then the description as well. The description is what is going to show up on the invoice. The same invoice that's going to be in SuccessWare and ultimately emailed to the customer is going to have a labor description here. So you want to make sure that that's kind of human readable and makes sense to your customers. Also, you have two fields down here, the standard cost. This is the amount that's going to hit the job costing. This is not a customer facing amount, this cost. This is simply used for job costing purposes. So you could set that cost to be whatever you would like it to be to hit your job costing analysis. However, here down is price. This is actually what is customer facing. This is ultimately what's going to show up on the invoice. If they add it in increments of, one, it would show that for the amount for the 1 hour of labor. So you could set that up and then you click save, and that will save that labor item. Now what you want to think about too is I know some of you that do time and materials labor have your labor hours kind of broken up different ways. You have kind of the first hour, and the first hour might be a bit more than each additional hour after that. If that's the case, I would recommend making two different labor items. Making one that's your standard labor, which would be the standard price, and then it would be maybe a new labor item here that would be something like additional hour of labor. This way, if you do happen to charge a certain price for that first hour and then a certain price for each additional hour after that, you can load it up that way too. And then this way I can set my costing and I can set my price. So instead of it being, 119 or 129, this one might be 89 or, again, it's whatever you guys have for your additional labor hour. You click save, and that right there will make a second labor item that's $89 to show the additional hours of labor that you can add on to the invoice. With that also, if you have a different labor rate for different customers, whether they be a club member customer or a senior citizen or military discount, anything you do that would be a little bit different than a standard labor hour, you have to make sure that you make an item for that as well. Also, if you do any kind of commercial work and residential work have different labor amounts tied to them, you want to make sure that you have those different labor amounts in your price book as well. So think about adding all of the different labor items that you may have there for the different tasks that you could be doing out in the field. With that too, think about the different types of work you do. Maybe a plumbing labor hour is different than your HVAC hour. Or maybe if you're using any kind of certain machinery where you're charging an hour for that machinery, you want to make sure that you add that line item in as well. So think about adding all of the pertinent labor items where they would charge by the hour to use on a job and putting them in your labor section of the price book. This way the technician out in the field can add that labor item right by going into the labor section and finding it. The other part of time and materials would be the parts section of it. Now the parts section is something you want to load up via your parts list. Now one way you can load up a parts list is to reach out to your suppliers and get all of your items in an Excel document. So if you can get all the items that you may have ordered in the last 5 years per se from your vendor, you can get that in an Excel document, and SuccessWare support will show you how you can load up that Excel document right inside SuccessWare so you get your parts list. So that's kind of one way to start. But if you already have some parts in there and you just kind of want to add to that list, you can load up here and add it. But a couple of things about parts that I want to talk about. First off, parts have an item number and a description. With parts, it's very important that the description is as specific as it can be about the part, because a lot of times when the technicians are out in the field adding parts to an invoice, it's real easy for them to search via the description. So for example, if they know that they're using a certain kind of item, maybe they know they're using a gas flex, they can just type in the word gas or flex, and any item that has gas or flex in the description is going to pop up. So think about adding specific sizes in the description, specific materials, maybe it be PVC, copper, any of your different types of materials, and making sure that you have words that are kind of keywords to the part into your description, because the technicians can search for the item that way. They can also search for the item via the item number. So making sure that the item number is something that maybe matches your manufacturer's item number or your supplier's item number is certainly another way to make sure that that part is as easy to find for the technicians. With that too, if you were to open a part, a couple other things I want to talk about. Just like before with the labor, there is costing and price. So you got to make sure that you have a price here. This is how much you are charging the customer for it. So if you are time and materials, make sure your standard price is the price that you want your technicians charging the customer. And just like before with the cost, costing is only an item that would hit the job costing reports for the job. So this might be how much you pay for it, or however much you want to associate with it with costing, so that you can add the item in there as well. So you add your costing and your price. If you also do a part as task pricing, you want to make sure you go through and you add your part as task pricing. So you can check off this checkbox, and then you can go through and add the R price and retail price inside here. This will then enable it so that you have the price that you're going to charge your customer, and if you wanted to show the retail price too, you could as well. This way, if you do any kind of task where you're assigning labor to the actual install of the part, you can go through and do that in here. And once you're done, you would click Save, and that will save that information. In addition with parts, the other thing you want to talk about doing is organizing it in kind of different sections. We talked about it with the price book a little bit, but making sure that the parts are kind of organized in ways that the technician can kind of jump through the tree structure and find the appropriate part. So for example, if you look at my parts list right here, you'll see that I have kind of broken it out into different sections here. So I have my air conditioning section, my brass section, the gas valve section here, my furnace section, basically setting it up so that my parts are organized in kind of little chunks of items that are pertinent to each section. This way, if the technician can't find it via doing a search for the description of the item number, they can hit the parts button, hit the category, so maybe it might be air conditioning parts, and then go down to the group level and find it that way. This way, in those instances where they can't find it, maybe they're having a tough time typing it in or whatever it may be, they can go through and it'll be in sort of a section that they recognize. They can scroll through, find the right item, and add it that way. So that's just another thing you want to think about when you're adding your parts. So that's pretty much it. So in kind of review, labor, just make sure you add your labor items for any different type of labor you might do. Make sure you set it up with a standard price, because that is what is customer facing. Make sure that the description is human readable so that the customer, when he receives an invoice, can understand what that item is. And also make sure that you have, your additional hour labor or any of your different labor types have a individual task assigned for it. And then on the parts section, you got to make sure that your parts, first off, have a human readable description as specific as you can be about the part so that you have some keywords for the technician to find. Also think about sizes being in there, making sure that you have, the size of the part, as well as the material. So if it's like a PVC or copper, you have something identifying that in the description. Also, you have the item number, making sure that the item number is something, if you use a manufacturer or a supplier's item number, you can add that in here. And then also make sure that each part item has a price assigned to it, because that is what is ultimately customer facing. And if you wanted to do part as task pricing, to make sure that you have a price in here for part as task pricing as well. This way the technicians can then add the items onto the invoice. Lastly, when you organizing your parts, make sure you go through and you give them specific groups to identify where each individual part will go. And that is everything. If you have additional questions about loading up parts into your parts book, please reach out to SuccessWare support. They can talk to you about loading up the parts list for you. In addition, if you have questions about how the parts are going to show up on the device or what price is on the device and any questions about that, please reach out to the SuccessWare Remote support team. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.